Chapter 6. One night, when I was about 3 years old, staying in C6, I awoke in the lap of a matron. She rocked me and caressed my back. I don't know why she might have taken me from my bed, whether I was sick or maybe having a nightmare. All I remember is that she held me there, comforting me until I slept. It stands alone in my memories of childhood. It was the only time I was ever held, and because of that, it remains one of my strangest and happiest moments of my early life. In early November, John tied a butcher steer to a post in the cow yard. I sat on the fence to distance myself from the slaughter, but John held up the sledgehammer and pointed to the animal's forehead. "Come, you hit there," he said. I didn't want to do it, but to avoid John's anger, I stepped down, slowly made my way to John, and took the sledge. Biting my lower lip, I lifted the sledge and closed my eyes. I hit the steer on the head with a thud. The steer bellowed and sagged to its knees, its head swaying. I dropped the sledge and stared at the beast. "You two hit again." "That not hard enough," John said. He picked up the sledge and thrust it at me. "I'm not strong enough," I cried. The steer was twitching and kicking. "Asshole," John said. He took the sledge and hit the animal. I heard the sound of bones crushing. The steer kicked one last time and was dead. The meat was taken to Rushford and stored in a rented locker. I attended school regularly through the rest of November and until Christmas vacation. Early December, John began to leave the farm after morning chores and didn't return until I had started evening chores. He was preparing to rent a small farm near Caledonia. He drank a lot at this time. I was used to his tirades when he drank, but now he openly berated Emma too. I had little idea what went on privately between the Schlauses. Emma knew that John could run a small farm without me, and she was pressing, though I didn't know it then, to get rid of me. Whether John wanted the security of having his work done while he binged in town, or he had to have someone to intimidate, he seemed intent on keeping me around. I knew we were going to Caledonia, but John would say nothing of a future school, and as far as Houston High was concerned, when I turned in my books, I was simply dropping out. Days before Christmas, the landlord paid us a visit. He was a stout man, well-dressed, in his 30s, with a business-like demeanor, but kind. On a Sunday, weeks earlier, he had stopped by the farm and taken me squirrel hunting on a ridge farm he also owned. He seemed to have taken a liking to me. "Have a few things for the family," he told Emma. "Can't stay. Just wanted to wish you all a Merry Christmas." He handed a sack to Emma, then turned to me. "Merry Christmas to you too, Peter. Here's a sweater for school, and there's another gift for you in the sack." Inside the sack were socks and a billfold, which would hold nothing for some time to come. "Thanks," I said. We began moving over Christmas vacation to the Lang farm, 2 miles northwest of Caledonia, on a country road serviced by the school bus. The farm had been the Lang family home until they bought a tavern in Caledonia where they lived above the bar. Emma sent Mary and John Jr. to the Bensons while we moved. Though the distance was only 14 miles, hauling farm equipment and household goods was hard, cold work. We had to milk and do regular chores through it all, and thankfully John drank little during the move. We often had others, including his brother, helping. On the last day, a truck arrived after morning chores. We moved the cows to the Caledonia farm and milked them that night under electric lights in a different barn. We were completely moved by the first of the year. Officially separated from Houston High during Christmas vacation, I looked forward to Caledonia High, but knew John had other plans. My move from Rushford to Caledonia became a loss, not only of friends, but of an important check on John's behavior. Rose Benson could no longer help me. After my 6 weeks in the hospital, I feared that Miss Munson would attack me again, but I returned to a cottage with no corporal punishment and no restrictions on walking in the halls after bedtime. Things seemed to improve. One evening that summer, The kids from all cottages were allowed to go to the gym and watch the older state school boys play basketball against the boys from the state school for the deaf in Faribault. Another night, Miss Crusley organized a carnival in the C-15 basement, giving us another evening of excitement, playing games of ring toss and lobbing balls into cups with popcorn balls as prizes. When summer arrived, there were picnics at Mineral Springs just out of town and bus rides to Clear Lake in Waseca, 13 miles away. Swimming at the gravel pit and other trips into town were a chance to get near, but not yet talk to, girls our own age. The only activity I shared with girls was school. Puberty was upon us, but the staff never explained anything about relationships with girls. They quoted scriptures, but other authority then left us to figure things out for ourselves. They didn't even help us with the basics of conversation. The school taught us to shake hands, say good morning and goodbye, but nothing of those rituals binding people to each other and society. My dark years in C-15 were about to end. After breakfast one morning in the assembly room, Mrs. Burt pointed to me and said, "You're going to C-16 this morning." Mrs. Burt saw me out the back door of C-15 for the last time. "Give this to Mrs. Steele soon you get there or you'll miss dinner," she said, thrusting a paper at me. She said no more and did not offer her hand, which seemed perfectly normal after 5 years with her. She had only touched me with brooms and radiator brushes, and to hold my lips shut while she squeezed my cheeks to make sure the soap foamed. My personal possessions in one hand, state school clothes over the other arm, I walked away without looking back. I was met at the door of C-16 by matron Mrs. Steele and Mrs. Corey, an assistant. The matron was middle-aged or younger and slightly overweight with graying black hair. "Peter Razor, is it?" Mrs. Steele said. She pulled a folder from under her arm and scanned it. "It seems you have a knee problem. How is it?" She glanced at my torn denims. "Okay," I said. "You're hard on pants, too," she said, then raised her voice. "Miss Munson thinks you trifle too much." "What?" Dale Cole appeared in my side vision. "Well, keep your nose clean and you'll get along," she said. "Mrs. Corey will explain the rules." She aimed her thumb toward Mrs. Corey. "There'll be no chores today," Mrs. Corey said, as Mrs. Steele headed for her apartment. "You can get acquainted with the grounds until dinner. Come Monday, you'll work in the gardens." I frowned, thinking of Mr. Beatty. Mrs. Corey faced Dale. "You know each other?" "Yeah," we both responded. "Good," she said, turning to Dale. "Show Peter around, but get him back in time for dinner. And don't leave the grounds just yet." Miss Klein, on the other shift, was also decent to me. Still, in her early 30s, she wore glasses and her brown hair had a neat perm. She was pleasantly uncomplicated doing what the matron expected of her. A boy could argue with her, even talk her down, but she never veered from schedules. Little out of the ordinary happened my first months at C-16. Working for Mr. Beatty in the gardens was tolerable, and the dark discomfort of C-3 and C-15 seemed to fade. The 32 boys in C-16 ranged in age from 12 through high school. It was confusing at first, sleeping near and working with older boys. Their talk was strange, even dull at times, about girls, work, errands in town, or athletics. Hierarchy seemed driven by hormones in one sense, age in another. But with its variety of talents among scholars and athletes, C-16 became interesting. Some smoked, others had friends from the girls' cottages. There were no individual lessons in music or dance, of which I was aware, nor counseling on making friends with girls. Boys who danced and played instruments, and those understanding boy-girl relationships, brought their skills from real homes. Mrs. Corey sent me to work occasionally for Mr. Disted, the other storeroom supervisor, whose office was amid the clutter of incoming and outgoing supplies in the basement of the main building. "Peter is a good worker, converses intelligently, is a pleasure to have around," Mr. Disted wrote. Polio had left him paralyzed and confined to a wheelchair. He was the first male employee to talk about things outside our work and give work instructions in a thoughtful, kindly manner. Few employees disputed the first assessment of a child, but Mr. Disted was willing to frame his own opinions. The Schlauses' move from Rushford to Caledonia afforded us certain comforts. We had hot and cold running water in the house and barn and an inside bathroom, and I had a warm bedroom. With electricity, I no longer needed candles, which had all but prohibited reading in bed, the only place I could. My bedroom was spacious with hardwood flooring, a chair, table, and a heat grate opening down to the living room. A small domestic refrigerator, the likes of which I had never seen, dominated the kitchen. Chores became even easier when John bought a portable milker for 2 cows at a time. We were no sooner settled on the new farm, however, than John's ranting began. I kept hoping they would send me away. We sat for supper on a cold day in January. "We don't need Peter no more," Emma said. "They's electric, and the milker, and the fields is close to the buildings. He's been nothing but trouble since we took him. Maybe he is dumb. He do chores and help with work," John said. "That's what you says," Emma said. "Who has to wash and mend his clothes? You give me barely enough money for food." "Watch your mouth, woman. I puts food on the table and works the farm. I sees he earns keep." I knew John would get his way. He always did. Excusing myself, I went to the barn to prepare for milking. No matter what they said, I wasn't too young or dumb to escape life with the Schlauses. I was by now too numb. John could hide his violations of the contract in the matter of my wages, negligence, and outright abuse from my overworked social workers who were more interested in checking off a visit to a client than in search for problems. By keeping me out of school against my wishes, however, John visibly stretched the placement contract to default. 4 weeks had passed since Christmas vacation, and John still kept me home. He couldn't ignore a letter from State Social Services in early February, however, which he and Emma discussed in the living room. Enough of their conversation drifted up through the heat grate for me to understand. "They wonder if we're doing good on the new farm," Emma said. "What do we tell them?" "That everything's good and Peter's good," John replied. "They wonder how he's doing in school," Emma said. She sounded nervous. "Maybe think of something," John said. "You tell them. I'm not saying he's in school when he ain't," Emma said. "When you're going to send him anyway, huh?" After hush talk, John spoke louder. "Maybe we let him go to school for now." That Friday, during a somber evening meal, I was told I could begin school the following Monday. The second Monday of February, wearing clean, though shabby clothes, I caught the school bus for the first time at Caledonia. The smell of cow manure went with me, and I couldn't have walked too briskly. If I were shy that first day at Houston High, I had reason to be even more so on my first day at Caledonia High. Inside the school, searching for the office, I edged along the hall away from student traffic. Locating the office, I waited at the counter as the secretary worked her way through first comes. She approached me last. "Good morning, young man," the secretary said. "What can I do for you?" She placed both hands on the counter, stiffened her arms, and smiled. "Oh, I supposed to register for school," I said. "I'd say you're in the right place," she said, taking pencil and paper. Her smile brightened, and I felt more at ease. "I'll need your grade and former school so I can send for your transcript." 10th grade, I replied, watching her write. "Houston High. Biology, English, Social Studies. I missed maybe 2 months of school this year, all told. Is that all right?" "It isn't, but if you work extra hard, you might just make it," she said. "I better write that down. Mr. Zulik should know about that, help you catch up, that sort of thing." She handed me the paper. "Room 205, Mr. Zulik. That'll be your homeroom. It's also biology." Things may change when we get your transcript, but this will get you started. Mr. Zillick is also our gym teacher and coach. Big man, hard to miss. Knocking on the door of room 205, I waited, then stepped back as a large man filled the doorway, gazing down on me. Yes? The office said to come here? I stammered. Yes, of course. Mr. Zillick took the paper. Come in. He scanned the paper as I passed him and waited just inside the room. He murmured, almost too low to hear, Missed 2 months? Could be a problem. He pointed to an empty desk. Sit there. I'll assign someone to help you catch up. After class, Mr. Zillick stood alongside the door as students filed out. He reached past others and gently gripped my upper arm, pulling me alongside the door near another boy. Peter, this is Terry. He has agreed to help you catch up, Mr. Zillick said. I'll ask Jean, who's not here today, to help as well. Both are excellent students. Hi, Terry said, smiling broadly. I guess we have the same classes. Hi, I forced a smile. Terry waved himself off. Gotta run, Peter. Call you Pete? Sure, anything. See you in study hall then, Terry nodded to Mr. Zillick and disappeared. Jean, who lived farther out on our rural route, also helped me in study hall. It was unusually easy for me to catch up on natural sciences, but biology involved more memory and research, and it seemed impossible that I could cram enough before final exams. Fortunately, John did not keep me home until fieldwork began in March, allowing me to catch up in most classes. The last Saturday of March, as John and I prepared field equipment near the silo, a car entered the driveway, stopped by the house, and a young woman, whom I had never met, stepped out. Yoo-hoo! The woman called, waving while stepping toward us. John straightened and strode over to meet her. After conversing low with her, he faced me. You come too, he said, motioning. I approached John and the woman in slow, measured movement and stood aside as they faced each other. This Miss Angier, John said. Looking at the ground, I glanced from John's boot to Miss Angier's shoes. Hello, Peter. I'm from State Social Services, she said, offering her hand. Hello, I said and shook her hand. How have you been? Miss Borsch wondered how you're making out in your new school. Okay, I guess, I said, staring at the ground. Are you sure there isn't something you want to tell me? Miss Angier asked. A concerned look wrinkled her face, and she leaned forward as though a whisper would do. I couldn't look her in the face and wanted to scream about John and that crazy farm. Instead, I just stared and mumbled at the ground. Guess not. She turned to John. May I speak to Peter in my car? What's he say to you? He say to me, John snapped. I didn't look, but his voice said he stared wide-eyed down the bridge of his nose at her. Well, Miss Angier said and paused. Well, I see there's little to be done at this time. She extended her hand to me. Be sure to contact me if you have any questions. She slowly got into her car, sat a moment staring through the windshield, and started the engine and drove off. I felt depressed for days after. I did not know that Emma had been writing letters asking State Social Services to remove me immediately. Supposedly, the letters had John's blessing, but during the social worker's visit, nothing was mentioned by either Miss Angier or John. Emma remained out of sight in the house, but the visit seemed to have meant something, for John was quieter and I missed no more school before summer vacation. Jean took biology and English with me. When Mr. Zillick asked him to help me catch up, he did, reluctantly at first. I did not realize that my sullenness and dress would cause even the friendliest of kids to keep their distance. In the beginning, Jean and I talked on the bus, mostly about our classes. Soon we talked about farming and our homes. Only a week to exams, Terry muttered. We were in study hall, Terry, Jean, and I, whispering the latest news. Don't remind me, Jean said. He cast a weary glance outside at Terry, then faced me. Dad can't wait till school's out. You gotta work, right? I asked. Yeah, but we snooze after dinner. Then I go to town a lot with Mom. I go to church Sundays, but we go right home after, I said. Last summer, I went to town twice besides church. No kidding? Jean said. Didn't you go to the fair? Fair? I said. Guess not. I felt even more out of place. Anyway, if there's dirty work, you get it, right? Jean interrupted. Yeah, I believe you, Jean murmured. The way Dad talks about Charles. He knows him? Not exactly. Our neighbors know him. Anyway, you guys are thrashing with us, so I'll see him soon enough. Not that I'm looking forward to it. Don't say anything to your parents, I said. If it gets back to John, I could be dead. He beats you? Not much, I said, talking low. Bitches a lot, though. He keeps repeating things, like he could write a whole book with 3 sentences. I'm trying to get away from him. Why don't you just leave? Jean sounds puzzled. Don't know, I replied. Where would I go? It's a long story. Jean leaned his head near mine. I got time. If I don't do what they say, him and the state... Seems I'd be breaking some crazy law or something, I said. I mean, they have a paper that says Schlals and the state have to agree on it if I leave. He can beat the crap out of me, but I'd probably go to jail in Red Wing for leaving him. What you gonna do? That don't make sense. The state telling you what to do here in Caledonia, Jean whispered. Besides, the court decides who goes to Red Wing. I'm a state ward, I said. They're the court. I'm in this mess because they couldn't find a better place for me. If they can't find a decent home for a state ward, they give him to a farmer. Good-looking white kids get decent homes. Shaw's got you because you're Indian, right? I shrugged. We studied biology until the end of the hour. As we got up to leave, my chair was knocked from behind and an elbow jabbed the back of my neck. Oh, so sorry, Injun, the boy snarled. He moved on, sneering over his shoulder at me. I stared at the boy's back. Know him? Terry said. No, I replied. Should I? He knows you, Jean said. Biggest bully in school. Don't know how many times they kicked him out of school for drinking and bullying, Terry said. He appeared disgusted as he watched the boy leave. Mostly picks on small guys. I nodded. He pesters smaller guys into fighting, then kills them, Jean said. Take you. He thinks there's no one on your side. 10-1, 'cause you're skinny. He'll make you fight him. Why me? I asked. He's Bud Lang. Our landlord's son? I said. No wonder Shawls get along with them. How old is he? 18 and a lot of months, Jean said. Looked the same since grade school. Though the bully roamed the halls of Caledonia High, a teacher named Mr. Zillick shared good thoughts when I needed them most. He stood in the hall as students moved through between classes. One day, he stepped into my path and held his arm up, stopping me. Good afternoon, Peter, he said. A toothpick flagged out of the right side of his mouth as he talked. Think you could go out for track and football? He then looked over my head and about the hall. I'd like to, but I have to work, I said. Other foreign boys take part in sports, he insisted. I mean, my guardian won't even let me go to games and things, I said. Besides, I couldn't ask him. Mr. Zillick sighed and removed the toothpick. Well, if things change, let me know. I'd like to see you out for track. He looked down at my feet. I noticed that you have no tennis shoes for gym, and your gym shorts are small for you. Does your guardian, Shawls, isn't it, plan to get those for you? Maybe not. I don't have any money. See me at noon, Mr. Zollick said, matter of fact. I might have shorts and shoes in your size. I can't pay for them, I said. Not to worry. People outgrow and donate things, and we give them to others, Mr. Zollick said, holding the toothpick near his mouth, then stuck it in his lips. Field work continued. Though I was no longer kept home from school that spring, bringing studies to the farm was like touching fire to gasoline, so I did all homework in study hall. Final exams were only moderately difficult, though I worried that I had failed something. All exam scores but biology were posted on the hall bulletin board, and those students waited in study hall until Mr. Zillick would post them. Terry, Jean, others, and I whispered at one table in study hall. Wonder why biology scores aren't posted, I said. Jean shrugged. Who knows? Shh, here comes Mr. Zillick now, a boy whispered. Good morning, people, Mr. Zillick said. Would you like to know who passed my favorite subject? He looked over our heads about the room while probing delicately with a toothpick through closed lips. You passed, Mr. Zillick said, pointing to Jean, Terry, and others, then to girls at the next table. He made the rounds of the study hall, addressing all biology students but me. About to leave the room, he paused at the doorway, looking out in the hall floor as though struggling through
A quandary. Jean leaned toward me. He forgot you, he whispered. Nope, Jean whispered back. I flunked, and he didn't want to say so in public. Mr. Zillick spun around in the doorway and faced our table, the toothpick no longer in his mouth. His eyes smiled. Peter, you had the highest A in the class. He spoke louder than he had to the other students, then left without another word. I was thrilled, but dared not show any emotion. Good going, Pete, said Jean's sister Kathy on her way to the door. Holy cow, Terry said. Sure you didn't cheat? I flushed. Don't they keep state board exams in Fort Knox until test time? I said, smiling. But it has to be wrong. Zillick never makes mistakes, Jean said. We went to find that biology scores were now posted and that I indeed gotten the highest grade. Mr. Zillick's announcement, I learned, was a lesson to students whom he had overheard making snide remarks about my race and my threadbare clothes. The test moved my final biology grade from near failing to a C average. I was promoted to 11th grade.